Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What are some of your true dark encounters, or glitch in the matrix, or scary stories that have happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
My wife of 22 years died earlier this year. She was every bit the happy homemaker. Every day after I went to work, she would make our bed like a soldier in basic training. It had to be just perfect, including the massive pile of throw pillows we had to unload every night and stack on a small couch in our room. During the last few months, when she became bedbound, I, of course, had to take over all the cleaning duties, which did not include a daily making of the bed. So the pillows remained stacked on the couch for months without moving. The night she died, I was awoken by the sound of a fan in our room being knocked over. I turned on the light, and the pile of throw pillows, which had not moved in months, fell onto the floor and knocked over the fan that was about 2 feet away from the couch. I piled them up back on the couch and got back into bed. I checked the time to see how long I had been asleep. It was 2:12 in the morning. My wife's birthday is February 12th. I have so many stories about this. My whole town is haunted, so haunted that Town Hall hired an investigation crew to come live here and then dedicated an entire section in our library to the town's paranormal activity. My favorite and most terrifying story is about the fog monsters. We get this Silent Hill-esque fog every now and then, and according to local legend, the silhouettes of figures can be seen when peering into the fog. Most people recount seeing the silhouettes of children and young adults, believed to be settlers from the 1700s. There are these two figures in particular, though, that earn their own stories. One of them is a quadruple hound. They're massive, easily 6 feet tall, standing on all fours. The other seems to be a little girl, but what's notable about her is that only her dress really seems visible. Like, you can make out her shape and outline just fine, but looking directly at her limbs or face seemingly makes them disappear while the floating dress stays. Although these figures seem dangerous, there haven't been any reports of them actually hurting people. In my experience, they actually led me home when I was lost one day. I wasn't near them, but there's like a wave of fear that comes over you when you see them that just screams, "Go the other way." While I was lost, they seemed to group up and completely block off roads, standing still just staring at me. I got home by just going down whichever roads they weren't on. So, in a sense, they seem pretty benevolent, but they might just be having a strong sense of community, as I do live where they did. Back to the two special figures, though. There's a legend of the girl visiting you in your dreams, mostly appearing in the dreams of children. She beckons you into the woods to play with her. When you wake up, you get a strong urge to go back to the place she takes you in your dream, but apparently nobody who returned to the woods while awake has returned. A lot of people who dreamed of her reported that they'd seen her commune with animals, and she has sometimes been seen with the quadruped. That leads me to believe that the quadruped is actually this lady's pet. Maybe not, but it's in my head canon for these guys. But these aren't what all the stories here are about. As an example, we have trails out in our woods for four-wheeling and dirt bikes. Sometimes, while walking down one, the path straightens where it shouldn't, and eventually leads to an opening in the woods. In the opening is a small cabin, a garden, and a sort of berry farm, like the kind that's in a dugout pit and gets filled with water for easy harvest. Legend says that a witch lives in the cabin, but the place is difficult to find. As a child, I tried mapping out all of the woods here to find it, but I've only ever been there twice, and both times were by accident. Anyway, this is from the town of Chester, New Hampshire. I can't say for certain that you'll encounter anything if you come here, but almost all of the residents have. Check out the library sometime if you're in the neighborhood.
Sounds like a pretty cool town. I think we'll throw it on the road map and maybe pop up there one weekend. So thanks for sharing the info.
Just recently, about 2 weeks ago, I was on my way to Home Depot when I arrived at this shop light. After sitting there for about 15 or so seconds, the light turns green. As soon as it did, I felt like I couldn't move at all. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like something was telling me to not go just yet. After about a second or two, this red Ford Explorer barrels through the intersection, running the red at what must have been about 50 miles per hour. I don't know how much exactly, but it went ridiculously fast. After the car sped through the intersection, I could move again. I don't know what the something was, but had it not been for that, I would have probably not been able to tell you all this little story. I think I lived in a haunted dorm room. My roommate and I kind of assumed the previous tenants were joking when they said they summoned a ghost, but it felt like bizarre, unexplainable nonsense was constantly happening in that room. About once a week, we would both wake up from a dead sleep at the same time, usually 3:06 a.m., and both our phones would be glowing on the radio, and the TV would turn on simultaneously. One night we were lying in bed and everything on top of my roommate's wardrobe fell to the floor. Our toilet water turned red one day and stayed black for like 2 months, then went back to normal. It was never clogged and kept working just fine. It just looked really off-putting. When we were showering, the shower curtain would get yanked open. Over spring break, I was one of maybe 12 people staying on campus. I woke up one night to loud snoring coming from my roommate's empty bed. I lay as still as I could for what felt like forever, until it finally grew quieter and quieter. Terrified of what would happen or what I would see if I rolled over. It was constant and always felt creepy and slightly malicious, like the ghost was just fucking with us. One afternoon, though, that changed. I'm not a napper, at all, but that day I just really needed a nap. I curled up under a blanket at the foot of my bed, facing the door. At some point, I very groggily woke up and continued, and I could tell someone was in the room, watching me. I was scared at first, but when I opened my eyes, I saw the vague outline of my grandpa standing in the doorway. It was like a wave of relief. I felt so safe and comforted by his presence. That semester was really, really challenging for me, but it felt like he was checking in to make sure. I know I would be okay. I've never shared that with anyone because I just knew it was him. There wasn't any cool concrete proof or anything. But all the weird shit from our other ghostly friend stopped after that. I don't believe in ghosts or paranormal connections and shit, but this one really baffles me to this day. It happened a couple of years back, and I still can't forget it. Warning, the story is kind of a downer. Also, sorry that it's so long, but this is about as condensed as I could get it. Most of my friends have had trouble with substance abuse throughout their lives. Just the crowd I hung out around with, I guess. Around the time of this story, one of my closest friends was clean off H for the longest they'd ever been, a couple of months. But still, fantastic progress for them. And things were looking good. We were hanging out one day, and he gave me some great news. Since middle school, he and his mom had been fighting for a medical malpractice lawsuit that happened to him when he was younger, and they won. He got something like 10 to 15K out of the deal. So most of what we talked about that day was just how he was getting to buy his mom something nice, and how he was going to use that money to finally go to college. I honestly hadn't seen him that happy in years, and it was great. A day or two later, I was sleeping like normal when all of a sudden I woke up at around 1 a.m. I felt great, in fact. I felt absolutely euphoric. I feel like I was lying in the sun on the most beautiful summer's day. It in a puddle of 1,000 puppies. And that was just the first second. The next second was that times 1,000. And the next second was that times 1,000 as well. Within moments, however, I went from this is pretty nice to, oh shit, something is seriously wrong, before blacking out. All of a sudden, I was walking down the stairs to my friend's basement. It was absolutely destroyed with shit thrown everywhere and empty bottles and syringes lying around. He was sitting there waiting for me on the couch with tears in his eyes. He just kept repeating that he was sorry and that he didn't want to hurt anyone. He said the money didn't last him long and he's back to being his broke-ass self. That he was sorry for bringing me here and that he just needed to say goodbye to someone before finally saying goodbye to me and everything fading out in another wave of euphoria. Me being logical to a fault and pretty straightforward, I woke up the next morning thinking, damn, what a weird dream. But not much else of it. Wrote it down in a dream journal I was doing at the time and completely forgot about it. I ended up going to work and class like normal. And then a couple of hours later, my friend's mom called. She called me to break the news that my friend had passed away that night, overdose. It wasn't until a couple of months later, when another friend of mine, also an ex-addict, was trying to console me by telling me how he went out with no pain, and how it was probably the best way to go. That things started to get really weird. He started to explain to me what an overdose actually feels like, the overwhelming euphoria, and how it's impossible to explain to someone who's never experienced it before, like me. It was then that what he was describing started to sound really familiar, and I went to my phone, opened my dream journal, and started reading the entry from a couple of months back to him out loud. He pretty much said, yeah, exactly that. Where'd you get that story? And told him the whole thing. Both of us were as boss and at a loss for words, and I still am. As I said, I don't believe in this stuff, and if someone told me this story, I would say they were high as fudge. But it's a memory that I will never forget. Growing up, my sister and I were good friends with our neighbor Matt. We had a dog, Molly. Molly ran away one day, so the three of us set out into the nature preserve behind our houses to look for her. Matt's brother Chris set out separately. In the preserve is an old dam or mill from the 1700s that is rumored to be haunted. When we got to the mill, we saw Chris and the gang and his dog on the other side of the river, maybe 30 yards away. "Matt, I got her. I'm bringing her home," Chris yelled, but something didn't feel right, and the three of us gave each other that look. We headed home, knowing Chris would be at a bit behind us in strength, since he'd have to go a mile or two out of his way to cross the bridge. When we got home, there was Matt's mom and the dog. She was under the porch the whole time, she said. A little while later, Chris showed up, having never even gone into that part of the woods. One night I was going to sleep, and all of a sudden I started sweating profusely. I tried to get up and turn on the AC, and I could not move from my bed. I was confused and a bit scared. I tried to shout to my sister in the next room over. I couldn't talk either. At this point is when I saw a dark figure in the corner, watching me. It felt like years until the silence broke. I muttered in a distorted voice, "You're not safe." At this point, I could hear my heart pounding like it was in my ear. Next thing I know, the figures moved across the room and to the front of my bed. It stared into my soul, and then I could move. I was soaked in sweat, and that night I did not sleep. To this day, I have never had sleep paralysis after that, and to this day, I still wonder who I am. 1 week after my great-grandmother passed away, I, 3 at the time, told my mom that I had seen her in my bed, and she had to tell my grandmother, her daughter, that she was okay now. I don't think I could even comprehend death, so spooky stuff. We lived in the same house with my grandparents. I was almost 3 years old when I walked into the kitchen where Grandma and parents were just talking, and I said, "Did you see Grandpa? He has just flown away." A few minutes later, the phone rings, and you can guess the rest. I don't really remember, of course, but Grandma says that anytime she thinks about it, it's a relief, because it reminds me and reminds her that there is something on the other side. I'm not into spiritualism or anything, but I am glad if it helps her, and I think the story is kind of creepy. I posted this a while back, but here's my encounter, which happened when I was in my mid to late teens. It was a Friday evening, maybe about 6 p.m. I was walking my dog through the woods. I was wearing headphones. I used to walk her all the time on this route, so there was no reason to be afraid. It was very rare to see anyone else walking at this time of day on a Friday, actually why I had chosen to walk her then. And I'm coming down through this field or valley when all of a sudden I start to feel on edge. The feeling just kept getting worse, so I turned off my iPod and took my headphones out. I was half jogging by the time I got to the bottom of this field. My dog had taken off way ahead of me at this point. I squeezed through a hole in the fence and onto the dirt path surrounded by trees, took the usual right, and kept checking behind me. Well, here's the horrifying part. I kept turning around to check if anyone's behind me, and I see someone or some shadow-like figure, which is more what this looked like. Flit from behind one tree to behind another, bigger cake tree. I think I audibly yelped at this point, but I kept power walking away. I was still fairly close to whoever or whatever this was, and tiny teenage me knew that I was unlikely to be able to outrun this thing. I kept walking a few more paces before turning around. Again, this goddamn thing is now standing right in the center of the path, further back near that tree. It had its arms straight down but out from its sides. Its hands were fists, and it was standing with this shadow of a man. It looked like it had a cloak and a wide-ish brimmed hat, but the whole figure was completely opaque. It just looked angry, and it's staring right down the path at me. Needless to say, I sprinted home from there and practically had a panic attack when I made it back. I have no idea what it was, but I know what I saw. This was in the UK, and the urban legend about that wood and that crossroad area in particular is that they used to hang people back on that oak tree way back when. Whatever the hell it was, it's not something I'll ever forget.